a voice for Black radical change and Black radical politics and revolutionary change. We're so glad that you're here with us on Black Power Media Reloaded. We're so pleased to be a part of this family of broadcasts and programming that's stimulating, that's educating, uplifting, and raising our consciousness. My name is Inez Barron, and I am the co-host along with my husband, the bold, the outspoken, the one and only, the indomitable, the unbought, and the unbossed.
Charles Barron. And I say this every week, and I mean it from my heart. My wife of 43 years, stunningly beautiful, intellectually brilliant, the bold, the one and only Inez Barron.
Thank you so much. Once again, you're listening to Operation Power. And we believe that we've got a message that's radical, that's uplifting, and that we want to share with you to give you a model and an example of what it is that we've done both in the electoral arena and in our community. But we believe that we need to start our program with a libation. Our program today, our topic is very exciting. We're talking about by any means necessary. And we've got some Black youth who are going to give their perspective on the one and only Malcolm X. But before we start our program, we do want to offer a libation because we recognize that we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, those who have gone before, who've sacrificed, who've paved the way, who've taught us lessons, and who are expecting us to get this torch and carry it on. So we do have a libation video that we want to share with you, and we're going to ask our engineer, Brother Kibu Kichuru, if he would do that now.
So for this very important presentation, we begin by the pouring of libation. We pour libation first to our first ancestor, to that hidden one who, though hidden, manifests in all things as all things, that God, goddess idea in the universe by any and all names. To our first ancestor, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the first people on this planet, mothers and fathers of all mankind, flashpoint of the human family. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the ones who first gave birth to the idea of civilization, knew we would need a form of governance, and they nurtured that idea along the Nile until it reached its zenith in Kemet. There they built these gigantic monuments as evidence of that great civilization, and they carved instructions on the walls of temples and tombs for us, so we would never forget. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because over time they put together all the tenets of civilization and they took those ideas and left the continent. They were the people of the first Exodus. They left Africa and went all over the world and peopled the world. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they did not sit on their laurels. They continued to improve, continued to evolve, and at each point of evolution, they again would leave the continent and settle and resettle the planet. They met themselves coming and going. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time, they found themselves the object of a forced exodus when they were kidnapped, shackled, cargoed, shipped out of Africa and enslaved in diasporas around the world. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to the ancestors left at home, the very young, the aged, the infirm, left to reinvent themselves, depleted of us, human resources. But they were enjoined by us in the diasporas, both objects of a global myopia that ruptured the soul of a people as it ravaged a continent. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time they began to remember who and what they were. Because no matter where they had been dropped off, they still retained bits and pieces of who and what they were. They retained that African core that described them. They began to remember bits and pieces of a song. They began to remember lines from a rhythm. They began to remember dances that they did in ancient times. They began to remember those ancient drum beats that they now beat out on bare skin. And so to those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to them because they then began to teach each other They began to resurrect and reconstruct that history and that culture. They became the new Africans wherever they were. They became the new teachers, preachers, archaeologists, the new singers, dancers, the new drummers, the new Jaliyah. They reconstructed that history and our culture and became new Africans everywhere. So to those ancestors, we pour libation. Ashe. Pour libation to those ancestors because they are the ones who passed that information on to us. And so we pour libation to those of you who will watch this presentation, those of you who are the recipients of that pieced together history, of that reconstructed culture. To you, we pour libation. Ashe.
Ashe.
Asheo.
Asheo. Thank you so much. We know that it's important to honor our ancestors. We may not know all their names. We may not know all the sacrifices, but we know that they made sacrifices and brought us to this point. So we do recognize them and say Ashe. We also have a brief, very brief video that we want to share with you, and it talks about Operation Power, who we are, what we've done, and what it is that we are working on in our community. So at this point, here's a video about Operation Power.
Operation Power stands for people organizing and working for empowerment and respect.
Operation Power is a grassroots social justice organization founded by local community stakeholders, which includes activists, organizers, and leaders who understand that the system as it is currently structured is destroying us and our communities.
The system, the capitalist system, one that promotes human greed over human need, one that promotes profit over people, needs to be dismantled. These local community organizers recognize capitalism needs to be destroyed and replaced with socialism.
Operation Power was founded in 1997 with the understanding that uprooting capitalism needs to begin locally. Operation Power understood that our communities are the perfect vehicle to dismantle this parasitic capitalist system brick by brick, and the economic, political, and cultural institutions and other systems in place in our local community infrastructure. Whether it's the local school board, community board, city council, state assembly, all represents mechanisms to control the destiny of our people.
Thank you so much. That's a little about Operation Power. And we've got a few books that we want to recommend to you for your reading, for your edification. The first one is called Speaking Truth to Power, written by none other than Charles Barron. And it is a compilation of articles and essays that he has written over the years, speaking to our condition and offering solutions to that as well. The second one is written by our guest, one of our guests. It's called It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On. And this is a very accomplished writer, Malika Jabali, and we'll be hearing from her shortly. The next book we would like to recommend is a novel, and it's entitled Black Rising, and it is written by Kevin Barron, and it is a page turner. Make sure you have time to finish it when you start it. The second in the series, the trilogy that he has written, is called Black Rising, Home and Abroad, and it continues the theme that was introduced in the first book, Black Rising. And the third in the series is called The Threat. So we encourage you to get all of these books, read them, your listening pleasure, your reading pleasure, and it will bring great information to you as well. They are available online at Barnes & Noble, and we encourage you to do that. Well, we're here. We're at our program. We've got an exciting program talking about By Any Means Necessary, a Black youth perspective on Malcolm X, also known as El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. We've got two young people that are going to be sharing their thoughts with us, talking about Malcolm X. We know that he was born in Michigan and that his parents were strong Garveyites. They were leaders in the United Negro Improvement Association. Both of his parents were in the leadership in the UNIA. And unfortunately, his father was killed in a so-called accident when he was 6, and his mother had challenges, and Malcolm X was sent to various reforms and foster homes, and none of them encouraged his genius and his brilliance, which was obvious. If you were a teacher in a classroom, you would have known all of that. But none of them encouraged that in him. And he did get into the criminal system, criminal justice system, so-called justice system. And it was there that he was introduced to the Nation of Islam.
Malcolm X, known as Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, one of the greatest attributes of Malcolm, when he visited Africa, he put African liberation on the map for Africans in America and made that connection. Malcolm X visited some of the more liberated African countries at the time. And when he came back, he said that we need to start an Afro-American unity organization, because he wanted to mirror it after the Organization of African Unity in Africa. So he said, I'm going to have the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And so in his last days, as he was putting this organization together, we want to talk about by any means necessary, because people don't understand that wasn't just picking up a gun and getting into armed struggle. He said we have a right to self-defense in his charter before he died. We should have rifle clubs and have a right to self-defense. But he also said in education, we need to be on. Conscious Black people need to be on school boards. In addition to that, he said we need to register and vote. He said any Black man or woman that's not registered is a traitor to their people. And he said, don't be controlled by the Democrats or the Republicans. We should start our own political club, and we'll only support those candidates that are supporting the Black community and our destiny. He wanted the economic situation addressed in our community, owning our own businesses and making sure the dollar circulated in our community. That's what he meant by any means necessary. So we have some videos or audios we're gonna show and hear of Malcolm X and have our guests respond to them. Inez, you want to introduce our guests?
Yes, we're going to bring our guests up now. We've got 2 young people that are going to blow your mind with their presentations. We've got Malaika Jabali, who is the author of the book, It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On. And we have Brother Amadou Andre joining us, and he's from the organization Black Men Bill. Welcome to both of you. So glad that you're here to share your genius with us.
Well, I am just honored to see both of you. I've done work with both of you. So you might want to say some opening statements if you'd like. And then we're going to get into the audio pieces on Malcolm X and have you respond to 3 of them. Malaika?
Okay, sure. It's so pleasant to be here. Thank you, Brother Charles and Sister Inez and Brother Amadou. I am really excited to be able to talk about Malcolm X. I don't think he gets enough credit as a prophet. And first of all, I must say that this is a youth perspective. So I'm also flattered that I am still within the category of a youth. Long in the tooth. But I appreciate being able to join you all and talk about Brother Malcolm. He is somebody that I have admired for probably all of my life. I grew up in what's called the Malcolm X grassroots movement, which is an organization, a movement with multiple chapters. And we had a chapter down here in Atlanta where I'm from and currently based. And his teachings about self-determination and just being proud of who we were as people, the fact that he wanted us as a people to acknowledge our own power, I think is so important. But what I don't think he gets enough credit for is being a prophet. He was a political prophet. He was politically astute. I have studied his speeches. I've reported on his speeches and written about them. And the things that he wrote, which we're going to hear from him in, I would say in the flesh, but in the voice, the things that we hear could be written today. The way that he's able to analyze politics, and not just as somebody who was an observer, but the fact that he experienced the other end of desegregation. So the way that he criticizes Jim Crow segregation isn't just because he's hating on what's going on the South, he's recognizing, as you mentioned, Inez, he was raised in Detroit, or he lived in Detroit. He was born in Omaha, Nebraska. He lived in these places where we didn't have desegregation, or we didn't have a Jim Crow movement because there wasn't Jim Crow segregation. But this is the result of what happens when you live in desegregated places. That doesn't mean they're going to equal equality. Just because we're amongst white people doesn't mean that suddenly they're going to see our humanity. So he already saw that and said, is this what we really want, Black people? And a lot of that is ringing true today. So I'm really excited to be able to hear from him and be able to get into this deep dive with his speeches.
Brother Amadou.
Peace, family. Peace, family. It's so good to see everyone again. Thank you, Charles and Inez. Thank you both for having me. And Malika, it's a pleasure to meet you as well. Glad to be on the panel with everybody. I'm with Black Men Build. We're a national organization helping to develop revolutionary Black men. So it's, Malcolm is one of the people who's always in our literature. He's always in our presentations. I can't think of it's never enough addressing Malcolm's examples. There's too much that we could learn from him, essentially. So a lot of what we focus on in our organization, specifically to developing revolutionary Black men, is transformation. The idea that where you start does not have to be a determinant of where you end up, So even to the point of transformation, this was, for us at Black Men Build, another point where Malcolm shines again, because he is one of those people who is an example of starting in one place and watching develop politically, watching develop as an organizer, and he was honest about his contradictions as well as the ones in the world around him, which I think I would argue is one of Malcolm's most powerful traits. If we can take nothing else from Malcolm, we can take honesty. Do not be afraid to critique the reality of whatever it is that you see in front of you. My favorite things he addresses in one of his speeches is, just talking to masses of Black people from all different education brackets, financial demographics, and saying, stop sweet talking the white man. Tell them how you really feel. He said, tell them how you really feel. And it's a beautiful thing, because it's such plain language. But that's the truth of the matter. How many times do we step into academia? How many times do we step into the workplace? How many times do we step into, so many spaces? And our first inclination is, to diminish ourselves, to hold back, watch our tongue, watch how we present, and all of that is the sweet talk Malcolm was talking about, and he encourages us to leave all of that behind, So once again, I'm honored to be with you all to talk about him and just excited for what we're about to get into.
Well, thank both of you. Now, y'all know y'all in for a treat. You see the opening. The opening was slamming. Malcolm, unfortunately, the reason why we're having this program, because on February 21st, he was assassinated in the Audubon Ballroom. And so we want to not just talk about his life, but talk about the impact he had after his death. Malcolm died at 39. 39. Martin Luther King, 39. Medgar Evers, 39. Maurice Bishop in Grenada, 39. Huey Newton, 40. So these were young men, and they gave their lives for our people. So we want to start off with the first clip. This one is talking about he was a powerful piece. He said, no taxation without representation. So we'll play that short clip and then have you all respond, and we got some other clips. Cairo?
Just give me a few minutes. I'll pop it. Just go ahead.
A few minutes.
2 seconds.
Oh, okay. So the reason why we wanted you to hear this one, because he says a lot of issues that we're organizing around now. And Malcolm, as I said, was only 39, so he didn't get a chance to really play out and organize all this stuff. And before we go off, I'm going to share with you some of the things he said around the Organization of Afro-American Unity. But this tape, you're going to hear him talking about some of the very issues that we're still dealing with today. And I am writing an article called No Taxation Without Reparations. If you don't pay us our reparations, then we should pay no taxes. And that's a way of us getting our reparations. No property tax, no income tax, no sales tax, no taxation of African people without reparations. Are we ready, Kru?
We want an immediate end to the police brutality and mob attacks against the so-called Negroes throughout the United States. We believe that the federal government should intercede to see that black men and women tried in white courts receive justice in accordance with the law of the land, or allow us to build a new nation for ourselves, dedicated to justice, freedom, and liberty. We do not believe that after 400 years of free labor, sweat, and blood, which has helped America become rich and powerful, that so many thousands of black people should have to exist on relief, charity, or live in poorhouses. We want the government of the United States to exempt our people from all taxation. As long as we are deprived of equal justice under the laws of the land. And that's correct. Why should you be taxed when you don't get anything in return? How can you be charged the same tax as the white man when you don't enjoy the same rights as the white man, or the same citizenship as the white man, or the same protection by the law as the white man? What do you look like riding in the coach on the train, second class, and paying full Pullman fare, while the conductor is out of his mind to make you pay in the coach as they're paying in the power car? So if you don't pay first class passage for a second class seat, you have no business in a government as a second class citizen paying first class taxes. The government of the United States should exempt our people from all taxation as long as we are deprived of equal justice under the laws of.
What do you think of that? I say no taxation without reparations. Malika?
I think there's a few things we can think about. One is, obviously black people since most of us are not paying our taxes, then that means we need to be making demands, because this government is using our money. We are paying income taxes. We are paying sales taxes. We are paying federal taxes. And since we are paying these taxes into this government that still treats us as second-class citizens, what are we doing to make demands? Since this is become a requirement for us in this country, how are we making sure that we are involved in the political process? And by political process, that doesn't mean that we are willy-nilly giving our votes to these two parties. It means, how are we recognizing our own power within this government that we have been forced, that we were kidnapped and sold into slavery and toiled on this land? How are we using our power as a people communally to make sure that we see some kind of some resources, some things in our communities? So it's about of course, the representation, but it's also, how can we then be those people in power? So we're demanding people to represent us, but we can see for decades we have not had adequate people representing us. So how do we become those in power? How do we make sure that we are putting revolutionaries in power? How are we making sure that we have people aligned with our politics who are in power? Because we've got billions. We've talked about this with Operation Power. We have billions of dollars in the city coffers. We have trillions of dollars in this federal government. And we're these people who claim to represent us, that we are voting for, instead of using our voices and figuring out alternatives to this two-party political system, we are putting money in a war chest for them to bomb Palestinians in Gaza, for them to deprive people of housing, for them to be basically kicking people off onto the streets. So this is happening all around us, and we can't just be observers. We have to represent ourselves within this system.
Amadou.
Yeah, when I hear Malcolm say that, for me, it brings to the forefront, like, where does your money go? Every time you get paid and every time you go be active in this society as a consumer, what's the flow of that? You know what I mean? And when you acknowledge that flow and you see all of the things that this government is responsible for, not just to what it does to Black people here, but what it does to Black people abroad, internationally, because the point was made already, to how our tax dollars fuel exactly what is going on in Gaza. But I also think about, when we're looking at the Congo, you know what I mean? And these tech companies that are, from here are over there putting people through situations where there's immense violence. They're, working for cents on the hour to produce the luxuries that the average American person completely just takes for granted, right? So it's an idea that if these people are going to continue taking from us, there has to be something given back to us in return, and I appreciate also the fact that Malcolm brought that contradiction, because it allows people to sort of understand, what is the purpose of a government, essentially.
Yes.
I think a lot of folks are unclear. There's sort of been an erosion as to what we think the people who lead us owe us. It's almost like, yes, we're supposed to pay, but they don't necessarily have to do anything for us. Like, even you can speak to certain folks, in our community, and when you have conversations about social services, welfare, SNAP benefits and stuff like that, there's almost like a demonization that happens of using these social services. But that's your money. And if the money that you pay is not going into the well-being of the people, what exactly do you think it's supposed to be used for?
Right.
If not for you to have a hospital bed to lay in when you're sick, if you to not have food, under certain, emergency conditions, if it cannot support you, then there's no point to any of it, So I think that when Malcolm makes that contradiction, he also causes us to challenge, what do the people who claim to be in leadership owe us? You cannot be taking from me on a weekly, monthly basis and then have nothing to offer me. If anything, the government should be responsible, ideally, not the American government. This is a completely warped situation. But ideally, a government is to steward essentially the resources and the affairs of the people, right? So whatever labor is produced, whatever profit is produced, it's to see how does it circulate back to the masses. And there is no circulation back to the masses. It goes to the top and it stays at the top.
That's
You see
right.
what I mean? And so I like the fact that Malcolm addresses that, because it forces us to reckon with, it's either we're giving and it's being properly stewarded, or we opt out and we move into something else.
Wow. Powerful, powerful. You mentioned the international Congo and some other international issues. I want y'all to hear this one on the Bandung Conference. Malcolm said 1954. It was actually 1955 in Bandung, Indonesia. At that time, there was a bilateral or Russia and the United States were the two powers. So there was a non-aligned movement. All countries decided that they're not going to be aligned to either one of those bipolar. That's what I was looking for. There was a bipolar international influence with Russia and the United States. So this conference in Bandung, Indonesia in 1955 is when all of the Asian and African countries came together and said, we're going to throw off the yoke of imperialism and colonialism. And that launched the independence movement in Africa, starting with 1957 with Osagyefo, Kwame Nkrumah, and the Gold Coast turned into Ghana. And then it went on and on with Patrice Lumumba, Bambela in Algeria, Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, and Julius Nyerere in Tanzania. So let's hear a little bit about the Bandung Conference that Malcolm spoke of.
For the same procedure you and I can use to get our problem solved. At Bandung, all the nations came together. They were dark nations from Africa and Asia. Some of them were Buddhists. Some of them were Muslim. Some of them were Christian. Some of them were Confucianists. Some were atheists. Despite their religious differences, they came together. Some were communists. Some were socialists. Some were capitalists. Despite their economic and political differences, they came together. All of them were black, brown, red, or yellow. The number one thing that was not allowed to attend the Bandung Conference was the white man. He couldn't come. Once they excluded the white man, they found that they could get together. Once they kept him out, everybody else fell right in and fell in line. This is the thing that you and I have to understand. And These people who came together didn't have nuclear weapons. They didn't have jet planes. They didn't have all of the heavy armaments that the white man has, but they had unity. They were able to submerge their little petty differences and agree on one thing, that though one African came from Kenya and was being colonized by the Englishmen, and another African came from the Congo and was being colonized by the Belgian, and another African came from Guinea and was being colonized by the French, and another came from Angola and was being colonized by the Portuguese. When they came to the Bandung Conference, they looked at the Portuguese and at the Frenchmen and at the Englishmen and at the other Dutchmen and learn or realize that the one thing that all of them had in common, they were all from Europe. They were all Europeans, blonde, blue-eyed, and white-skinned. They began to recognize who their enemy was. The same man that was colonizing our people in Kenya was colonizing our people in the Congo. The same one in the Congo was colonizing our people in South Africa and in southern Rhodesia and in Burma and in India and in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. They realized all over the world where a dark man was being oppressed, he was being oppressed by the white man. Where the dark man was being exploited, he was being exploited by the white man. So they got together under this basis that they had a common enemy. And when you and I here in Detroit and in Michigan and in America, who have been awakened today, look around us, we too realize here in America, we all have a common enemy. Whether he's in Georgia or Michigan, whether he's in California or New York, he's the same man. Blue eyes and blonde hair and pale skin. Same man. So what we have to do is what they did. They agreed to stop quarreling among themselves. Any little spat that they had, they'd settle it among themselves. Go into a huddle. Don't let the enemy know that you got a disagreement. Instead of us airing our differences in public, we have.
That's good. Powerful stuff. I'll start with you this time, Amadou. What are your thoughts?
You know, I love that particular speech of his. You know, when he mentions, he's so confident when expressing that the one common denominator amongst all the struggles was the European, and also enforcing that somebody couldn't come, and it was the white man who couldn't come, you know. And I think that's very important to emphasize, because I think that a lot of our brothers and sisters, it is difficult sometimes to conceptualize of a vision that does not involve the colonizer's input. There's this idea almost that, you know, he is the civilized one, he is the proper one, you know. And so a lot of times when we're even analyzing our solutions, potential solutions to our social and political issues, it's always within a framework of what is acceptable to white supremacy still, you know. And I think when Malcolm makes the point of the fact that, you know, they weren't there, it makes a call to Africans to understand that you can solve your problems by yourself. You don't necessarily need, you know, the oppressor's input. And any solution that you're going to arrive at with him in the picture is very much likely not going to be much of a solution anyway. You know, it's not going to get you where it is that you as an African person need to go. It might get him where he needs to go, but it's not going to get you where you need to go. And even just thinking of the current state of the world as it is now, I think he would, you know, be happy to see what's going on, you know, even in the Sahel, you know, because this is an example, you know, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, 3 African nations who have decided that instead of just focusing on individual, we have a common enemy. The colonizer has contracts for the mines in each of our countries. It's just a different mineral, you know what I mean? So there is no reason why they need to continue be exploiting our, you know, resources, putting us in these contracts where they bring the technology, they completely rob our natural resources as if we do not have the intellect to come up with it ourselves, you know. So it really is one of his strongest moments of really advocating for self-determination, like self-reliance, you know. Let us really come together. And the only other thing I want to touch on is he didn't finish speaking on it, but even towards the end, it's like when you have a disagreement, you can have your disagreements in-house. You know, sometimes our analysis can be more focused on anger with each other than at the person who's actually running the entire slave system. And I think it's just important to realize that regardless of what specific camp you might think you're in, our problems more or less are very similar. You know, so at some point we have to be able to look for the commonality and say, okay, you might be attacking on this front, I may be attacking on this front, but we already know that it's us versus this enemy because it's reflected all around the world, not just in America.
Good point. Malika?
I don't really have a whole lot more to add to that. I will say what I appreciate about what Malcolm did is just thinking about the historical context of this. We're talking about the 1960s. He's talking in Detroit and in Cleveland, and a lot of these cities where he toured in the northern United States. And Black people were a definite minority. We were a numerical minority nationally, but especially up north in some of these Midwestern states, we were absolutely outnumbered by white people. And so if we're thinking very hyper locally about what our specific fight is here, where, okay, we need to desegregate counters. We need to make sure that we have a Voting Rights Act. We need to have a Civil Rights Act. We need to have, fair housing and all these things. He wanted us to think bigger than that. We are not a minority around the world. People of color are dominating population wise. We come from a people who have great intellect and gifts and inventiveness and contributed to the world. So if we are thinking in our small, the way that the white dominant power structure has tried to force us to think that our history starts at slavery, that our history starts with being fighting for desegregation in the United States, that our history starts with this, instead of thinking of us on a global stage. So the fact that Malcolm was doing that in the 1960s when it was important to fight for those things, to fight very locally, but he wanted us to think globally, both I think for our psyche and also very practically. How are we going to be able to overcome, at the time, we had the Berlin Conference and you had European nations who were unifying. And then now we've got a European Union who has unified. So they make sure that they unite along their interests. So how are we going to do that globally with other people, what we call the global South, aligning with alternatives to these Western values of individualism? Because they weren't aligning just as Black and Asian nations just to be capitalists. They were aligning specifically as many of them, he mentioned that there were some capitalists, but many of them were advocating for socialism. They got their liberation through socialism. We know Assata Shakur told us that there was no country who was seeking their independence, seeking their liberation in Africa that was not also fighting for socialism. So it was about organizing people to have an entirely different world view. And when you have a different world view, you can have a different economic system. That means a different political system. And that means a different value system. So the fact that he brought that to us at our doorsteps back, in Detroit, in our churches was extremely valuable for us.
Well, I have another one. Y'all going to like this one. We got to have some real conversation on this one. This is also from Message to the Grassroots when they talked about the house Negro and the field Negro. So I know y'all going to have fun with that one. Kiru?
Master. He wants to live near him. He'll pay 3 times as much as the house is worth just to live near his master. And then brag about, I'm the only Negro out here. I'm the only one on my job. I'm the only one in this school. You're nothing but a house Negro. And if someone come to you right now and say, let's separate, you say the same thing that the house Negro said on the plantation. What you mean separate? From America? This good white man? Where you gonna get a better job than you get here? I mean, this is what you say. I ain't left nothing in Africa. That's what you say. Why, you left your mind in Africa. On that same plantation, there was the field Negro. The field Negro, those were the masses. There was always more Negroes in the field than there was Negroes in the house. The Negro in the field caught hell. He ate leftovers. In the house, they ate high up on the hog. The Negro in the field didn't get nothing but what was left of the insides of the hog. They call them chitlins nowadays. In those days, they call them what they were, guts. That's what you were, a gut eater. And some of you all still gut eaters. The field Negro was beaten from morning till night. He lived in a shack, in a hut. He wore cast-off clothes. And he hated his master. I say he hated his master. He was intelligent. That house Negro loved his master. But that field Negro, remember, they were in the majority. And they hated the master. When the house caught on fire, he didn't try and put it out. That field Negro prayed for a wind, for a breeze. When the master got sick, the field Negro prayed that he died. If someone come to the field Negro and said, let's separate, let's run, he didn't say, where are we going? He said, any place is better than here. You got field Negroes in America today. I'm a field Negro. The masses are the field Negroes. When they see this man's house on fire, you don't hear these little Negroes talking about our government is in trouble. They say the government is in trouble. Imagine a Negro, our government. I even heard one say, our astronauts. They won't even let him near the plant. And our astronauts, our Navy, that's a Negro that's out of his mind. That's a Negro that's out of his mind. Just as the slave master in that day used Tom, the house Negro, to keep the field Negroes in check, the same old slave master today has Negroes who are nothing but modern Uncle Toms, 20th century Uncle Toms, to keep you and me in check, keep us under control, keep us passive and peaceful and nonviolent. That's Tom making you nonviolent. It's like when you go to the dentist and the man is going to take your tooth. You're going to fight him when he starts pulling. So they squirt some stuff in your jaw called Novocaine to make you think they're not doing anything to you. So you sit there and because you got all that Novocaine in your jaw, you suffer peacefully. Blood running all down your jaw. And you don't know what's happening because someone has taught you to suffer peacefully. The white man do the same thing to you in the street. When he don't want to put knots on your head and take advantage of you and don't have to be afraid of you fighting back, to keep you from fighting back, he get these old religious Uncle Toms to teach you and me. They're just like Novocaine, suffer peacefully.
Powerful, powerful words from Malcolm. Malika, what saith you?
Wow, I mean, that's a lot to chew on. First of all, Malcolm had jokes. He was a comedian. I would have loved to be in the audience because he was so witty and engaging as a speaker. And also, like Brother Amadou said earlier, just very honest with our people. He didn't hold back, you know, and so we're talking about a radical perspective of Malcolm X. And I think that's the important context here because he understood that we're dealing with getting at the roots of American capitalism because he was an anti-capitalist. We're getting at the roots of white supremacy, and just white domination overall, because it wasn't just about trying to integrate within the system. We had to radically remove ourselves, be independent, or we needed to transform the system. And so, you know, just going back to the metaphor of using a house Negro, and, you know, to be clear, enslaved Black people, they resisted their oppression everywhere they were, including some Black people who were in the house. But as a metaphor, what we're talking about are Black folks who are selling out.
That's
And
right.
they're selling out because they're buying in to this Americanism. They're buying into capitalism. They're buying into individualism. When Trump says the Dow was up, they say, how far up? Let me check my stocks, you know? So they have bought into it. And so if you have bought into it, if you have aligned yourself with this system, how likely is it that you will liberate yourself from this system? If you believe that if America succeeds, that you automatically succeed because you believe that the country has incorporated you into its fabric, it's going to be hard for you to tear yourself away from it. So Malcolm was like, let me talk to y'all straight. You might believe that you're sitting at this lunch counter, you're being accepted into these institutions, but you fundamentally are not a free person. And then a part of that, by almost, it's like a psychological warfare in a way. If you think you are American, in some ways, you're not recognizing your own Africanness. You're not recognizing your own roots. You are diminishing who you are. And so that's adopting this kind of inferiority complex where you don't realize that you are enough. As a Black person, you are enough. And you do not have to be subsumed by this American government that's really not going to be looking out for you in the long run.
Brother Amadou?
Before you go, Amadou, Kiru, put Joyce's quote back up. I just want to read what she said. Joyce Brayboy from Operation Power said, we must unite our communities from the U.S. to Africa to the Caribbean and wherever Black people live to fight colonialism and capitalism and any system that oppresses us. That's from Joyce Brayboy. Ashe. Amadou.
I'm so grateful that Sister Malika brought about this concept of wanting to look at ourselves as Americans as opposed to Africans. Because there's some scary behavior going on in our community right now with the rise of some folks who consider themselves FBA, foundational Black Americans, ADOS, you know, and the heart of it is exactly as, you know, she just mentioned, you know, it's this idea as what Malcolm was talking about. The slave master's house catches fire and you think it's your house, you know, and it's never been your house. It's never been your house. And I think, you know, if we take anything, you know, from the current even political events, you know, everything that the Trump regime and this United States government is doing right now, if there's anything our people should take from it, it's understanding that not for one day have these people switched up from their original agenda, you know. We might be in some more positions, some more schools, some more advertisements, and some more movies, but they have never given up on their goal of keeping us oppressed and bringing us back further into the oppression from where they see themselves. You know, I love that he emphasizes that as well, because it's true. You know, integration wasn't the goal. You know, so many things about our lifestyle as Africans have changed since we've been forced to live among the colonizer, right? Which is why I think we have the contradiction of almost like demonizing ourselves. And it's amazing that Malcolm did that. You know, Malcolm spoke so much and so highly of Africa. You know, he went as far to go and say, you know, if you think that you need to get Mississippi figured out before the Congo, you'll never get Mississippi figured out. And what he was saying is, you think your problems are local American issues, and it's an international Black problem that you really have. You know what I mean? Your situation here is just a reflection of what's going on there. Or even with Harriet Tubman, you know, she would say to us that she freed 1,000 slaves. She could have freed 1,000 more if they knew they were slaves. The house Negro does not know that they're a slave. The Black capitalist does not know that they're a slave. You know, the Black, you know, government bootlicker does not know that they're a slave. They think that, you know, they can find a way to intermix themselves, you know, maybe get some crumbs from the table, and that is somehow supposed to liberate all of us, but it never works like that, you know. So Malcolm, you know, he does a beautiful job here at emphasizing, you know, not only seeing himself as a field Negro, but giving the masses that identity as well, you know, to just make us understand that whatever you see at the top of Europe and at the top of America, that is not for the African. You know, that is for those people, but it's not for us. We have our own, we can build our own. And if anything goes wrong to, you know, those folks at the top, we need to figure out how to clap and make it happen a little bit more, you know, because it can only benefit us. It can only
So
benefit
true.
us.
So true. Cairo, put the quote back up from, I think it's Diasporic Music. They said, Diasporic Music said, "We are Africans, period." No question about it. We want last clip as we run down on our time, but this is from the Ballot or the Bullet, Malcolm X.
The country here was first being founded. There were 13 colonies. The whites were colonized. They were fed up with this taxation without representation. So some of them stood up and said, liberty or death. So I went to a white school over here in Mason, Michigan. The white man made the mistake of letting me read his history books. He made the mistake of teaching me that Patrick Henry was a patriot and George Washington wasn't nothing nonviolent about old Pat or George Washington. Liberty or death was what brought about the freedom of whites in this country from the English. They didn't care about the arts. Why, they faced the wrath of the entire British Empire. And in those days, they used to say that the British Empire was so vast and so powerful when the sun would never set on it. This is how big it was. Yet these 13 little scrawny states, tired of taxation without representation, tired of being exploited and oppressed and degraded, told that big British Empire, liberty or death. And here you have 22 million Afro-Americans, black people today, catching more hell than Patrick Henry ever saw. And I'm here to tell you, in case you don't know it, that you got a new generation of black people in this country who don't care anything whatsoever about ours. They don't want to hear you, old Uncle Tom, handkerchief heads talking about the ours. No. This is a new generation. If they're going to draft these young black men and send them over to Korea or South Vietnam to face 800 million Chinese. If you're not afraid of those odds, you shouldn't be afraid of these odds. Why does this loom to be such an explosive political year? Because this is the year of politics. This is the year when all of the white politicians are going to come into the Negro community. You never see them until election time. You can't blame them until election time. They're going to come in with false promises. And as they make these false promises, they're going to feed our frustrations. And this will only serve to make matters worse. I'm no politician. I'm not even a student of politics. I'm not a Republican, nor a Democrat, nor an American, and got sense enough to know it. I'm one of the 22 million black victims of the Democrats. One of the 22 million black victims of the Republicans, and one of the 22 million black victims of Americanism. And when I speak, I don't speak as a Democrat or a Republican. I speak as a victim of America's so-called democracy. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. If you go to jail, so what? If you're black, you were born in jail. If you black, you were born in jail. In the North as well as the South. Stop talking about the South. Long as you south of the Canadian border, you're South. Don't call Governor Wallace a Dixie governor. Romney is a Dixie governor. $22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. They see that the whites are so evenly divided that every time they vote, the race is so close, they have to go back and count the votes all over again. And which means that any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position.
So talking about the ballot or the bullet, talking about no differentiation between North and South, talking about no differentiation between Republicans and Democrats, but talking about we coming together and having that opportunity to try to have that impact. So we'll start with Amadou.
Read that first.
Oh, we're going to be, Audre Lorde informed us that we can't use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. The American dream is not us. That's from Robert Brown. Okay. So Amadou, have your responses to what Malcolm said?
Yeah, I can only say, that his analysis in my eyes, it was very much the correct one. I think one mistake that, some of our people have made like throughout history is thinking that we determine our identity, as these numerous things, Democrat, Republican, American. And Malcolm X, he said, I'm none of those. And I know it. You know what I mean? I have enough sense to know it. And I think how we as organizers, how can we bring the collective to a point where they also understand that you are neither of those three? Those categories do not include you. They might come to your city or town whenever they need some votes or, they want to pass something and they need a little bit more support. But when they're developing their country, their world, their army, it is not about your protection and your safety, your humanity, essentially. So I think Malcolm, he just reminds us that, yeah, you don't need to see yourself in these people. And if there's anything that you're thinking about, it needs to be, what can I integrate in my life? What actions can I take to distance myself from these people? Because their democracy hasn't worked for me. I don't have any human rights. It's not being reflected in these speeches and these laws that they pass. So clearly, it's just not in their intention to do it.
Right. Malika?
Malcolm is touching on a couple of things here, and it's just really prophetic because we can see the same exact dynamics happening today. On one hand, he's talking about the fact that we're essentially being played by both of these parties. Does that sound familiar? Where they come in on election year, just for some historical context, this was in 1964. So Lyndon B. Johnson was running for re-election. They had the opportunity to pass the Civil Rights Act when JFK mentioned it in 1963. It was languishing for a whole year. So finally, Lyndon B. Johnson gets up the nerve or whatever to say, okay, well, it's election time. So let me go and put this carrot in front of Black folks as a stick so that they can vote for me and get me back in office. So what Malcolm is reminding us of is they both tend to play us. And we have this power. It's either the bullet or the ballot. If we're not picking up arms, we have this ballot that is a weapon. So we don't need to operate from a scarcity mindset because clearly they need us. He's passing this legislation because he knows he needs Black people's votes. And that's exactly what the dynamic is right now. So if we're not picking up arms, we're not engaging in armed struggle. And this is also a simultaneous struggle. It's not, voting is not a panacea. We also have to recognize the power of being able to use your vote wisely. If he was saying this even in the 1960s, that you can abstain, you can do with your vote what you will. We don't need to be saying all of our ancestors died for us to vote just so that we can vote for Democrats or any other party. It was to say we have this power and we need to be able to hold on to it however we choose in a way that benefits Black people. So on one hand, yes, we need to be independent and recognize how they play us. And on the other, if we're going to be a part of this system and we do choose to vote, we don't need to just align with white folks because we believe that if we don't give them our vote, then we're not going to get anything. We have power in our hands.
That's right. Well, thank both of you. We've run out of time, but Malcolm did mention this is a new generation. You are representing another generation, and they're not going to take some of the things of the past generation. Yes, you'll learn from the past generation and build on it, but y'all ain't taking the same kind of things that some had taken in the past. What's that remark there?
Data and Kamathi joined the Ancestors 69 years ago, February 18th, 1958, from Diasporic Music.
Rest in peace. So we want to thank both of you. We're going to have you back again. We've run out of time, but what we say each and every week, the truth shall set you free, and power is the great equalizer. Black power.
Black power.